I mean, what's the end goal here, Aaron? Is it to discredit this judge, discredit his decision, punish him personally? What's happening here?
Yeah, I think some of those things may be incidental, really. You think about the way President Trump has spoken throughout the course of this presidency, all the years that he was out of office and the time that he was in office before. This sort of rhetoric, this language that we're hearing from him, criticizing and demeaning people who he perceives as working against him and working against some of his goals, this is language that is familiar. This is very much consistent with his style. I think more substantively, if you look at some of these court cases, the administration is making the point that it is going to fight. They believe that President Trump does have ultimate authority to do all the things that he's done, despite the dozens of legal challenges that we've seen across the last several months, really, involving different agencies and different actions that the administration has taken. We've seen time and again that the Department of Justice has sent their lawyers into these courtrooms before these judges to argue against challenges to President Trump's authority. And they've appealed decisions that judges have put in place, pausing some of the efforts that have been underway over these many months, Chris. And so I think ultimately what you're going to see is President Trump continuing to use the language that he's used and the Department of Justice continuing to push back against these challenges to his authority. And as new challenges pop up, I think you can expect to see the administration continue to fight, as many of these cases, or at least some of these issues, are likely to end up in the Supreme Court. The question then becomes what happens when it gets to that level and a decision comes down from the highest court in the land, Chris.
So, Jeremy, bigger picture, this does appear to be a fight that this administration wants to have. Take a listen.
This is about a wholesale shift on what a terrorist is and how they should be treated in the United States. And, of course, that is going to present an Article 2, Article 3 in the Constitution conflict. But really, that's what this is. And this is squarely under the commander-in-chief's authority to keep Americans safe. And I'm telling you, that's how most Americans see it.
So that's obviously the national security director. There's a messaging effort here. I mean, it included right when they got all of the Venezuelan deportees. They put out all that video. They showed them getting their heads shaved. They showed them bent over, handcuffed. They were restrained at the ankles. Talk about the audience for all of this and the message that they're trying to send.
Right. Well, these scenes were very reminiscent of what happened in 2001 at Guantanamo Bay, right? You know, the shackled prisoners, this, putting them into very primitive facilities. And no doubt that is the message that this administration wants to convey. You ask about, who those images are for. Those images are not just a, political effort for Trump's base, kind of red meat, if you will. Those are meant to be seen by people who would potentially cross the border, make the journey up from Central America as a warning. Don't come here, you will be sent back. Obviously, it's a pretty harsh, jarring warning, but that is the policy purpose here, and there's, as I said, a political purpose as well. But as Lisa said, there is a real tension here with a question about what constitutes national security. And the administration has taken a very, very broad interpretation of what they see, what they are justifying with saying, oh, this is related to national security. This is related to the foreign policy interests of the country. Now, the president does have broad authority there, but Congress also has authority. And they've passed laws like the Patriot Act that have very specifically spelled out what the president can and cannot do with regard to terrorism. So, it's going to be a fight. Mike Waltz is exactly right. There's going to be a fight about whether or not Congress needs to change the law in order for Trump to do some of what he's doing with these deportations, not just of migrants, but of more political targets, like the student we have who is now sitting in a detention facility in Louisiana awaiting deportation.
Yeah, and with all those things happening, Michael, there's been a lot of discussion about whether we're headed for a constitutional crisis. But the New York Times' Adam Liptak writes this, quote, "Legal scholars say that is no longer the right inquiry. Mr. Trump is already undercutting the separation of powers at the heart of the constitutional system, they say. And the right question now is, how will it transform the nation?" Are they right about that?
Adams is absolutely right. We're here. We've been in it since, the last couple of months of this administration.
There's only been a couple
when it
months
just-
of the administration.
Right.
And not even, I think.
I had to think for a moment there, Chris. It feels a little bit like 2 years, but yes, it's been 2 months. I think that reporting is spot on where we are. Lisa knows this very well from her reporting and coverage of this and seeing the transformation around these very what would otherwise been pillars of our constitutional democracy being chipped away at. And here's the part that is so aggravating and galling to me, and I'm sure to a lot of Americans, is that our elected current leadership is wholly feckless in both ways, either not responding and letting it happen, Republican members of the House and Senate, or not having a clue how to address it and push back against it if you're a member of the Senate House Democratic caucus. And that's the frustrating part. This is now left to the American people exactly where the founders always wanted it to be. And this country's direction rests in our hands, not in the hands of elected leaders, because they have been summarily either bought and paid off with power and promises that they won't be touched, or are standing there in the corner shuddering and cowering, afraid to figure out exactly how to push back because, well, we've never done this before. We haven't been here before. None of us have been here before. None of us want to be here. But damn it, you got to stand up at this moment and say enough. We're now at the last wall, folks. It's called the courts. It's the last wall. And the only thing we're doing right now is, sort of sitting back, waiting and anticipating, when will Donald Trump refuse to obey a court order? Well, damn it, he's already done it. The plane landed. All right? The plane landed.
And there's actually an indication, Jeremy, that the American people are reacting to this because there's this new NBC News poll. 43% of Americans believe the executive branch has too much power, compared to 28% who say that about the judiciary, and only 18% say Congress has too much power. So what's your sense of the American people and whether they have any sway with the members of Congress who they elected to do what they wanted them to do, and seems to be being interpreted as not about members of Congress, but that Donald Trump was elected to have carte blanche?
Yeah, well, members of Congress right now seem only responsive on the Republican side to President Trump and his wishes and whims because they believe that's what their voters elected them to do. They have not exactly shown a lot of spine in standing up to Trump. And in fact, they have gone so far as to give up certain authority to him. Just look at what happened with the budget showdown just this last week. I mean, the Republicans went from being, the party that exerted their desire to see more fiscal discipline and austerity, as Michael Steele well knows, through the Congress to basically just saying, OK, we'll do whatever the president and Elon Musk want us to do. I don't know voters who are paying all that close of attention to the ins and outs. I mean, the conversations that I have had with people who are conducting focus groups, with people who are in the congressional districts, are kind of what you would expect. The shutdown debate isn't really registering. People are concerned about what they're always concerned about, their ability to make ends meet and to have a comfortable life. To the extent that the Republican control and Trump control of government, all three branches, starts to impact that well-being and comfort, then I think you're going to see something different.
Michael, I only have a minute left, but I do want to ask you about what Eugene Robinson wrote in the Washington Post today. He makes the argument the president keeps distracting us with shiny objects, like attacking Canada or canceling Hunter Biden's Secret Service protection. Quote, every day is a new episode of Trump's reality show and another opportunity for boffo ratings. But each day is also another step in the weakening of the rule of law and the undemocratic, un-American concentration of power in one man's hands. Do you have any advice for Americans who are trying to separate what's real from the distraction? Because it is hard to follow the bouncing ball, and people who come up to me, the number one word I hear from them, I'm guessing you too, is exhausted.
Yes, exactly. Gene crafts an excellent piece in that, and that piece that you pulled out there really is the end game. That is the end game. I'm going to throw a lot of things up in the air, and I know the press and the politicos well enough that they will go down each of those rabbit holes and get lost in those storylines, fretting over whether or not we're going to invade Greenland or the back and forth between Canada and the United States. All of that is just melodrama, that sort of subtext storylines that entice and make you want to eat more of that popcorn while you're watching this unfold. Meanwhile, not really paying full attention to what we've been talking about here, which is the rights you have as a citizen, the rights you have as an individual with a green card, the rights that you have as someone who is running away from and seeking asylum and avoiding persecution. Our Constitution was designed to protect you on this soil. Our courts are designed to enforce that protection within the confines and the requirements of the rule of law. Our political leadership are there to